So yeah, I felt a lot of discrimination, and I went through a lot of stuff there that I didn't even want to go to school anymore because of the discrimination that I was having.
Oh, yeah. And how do we deal with that? How do we cope with that? For anybody who's experienced that, how do we cope with feeling outcasted or feeling different? Especially when it comes to our race. Embracing it, right? Maybe we need to change the narrative a little bit and look at our otherness, how people other us, as our superpower, right? Our uniqueness, right? I love the analogy of the salad bowl. Have you ever heard the salad bowl analogy?
No.
What? All right, so they used to call America the melting pot, right? Where everybody comes here and we all melt away our uniqueness and our individuality, right? We become one. We assimilate into one. Right? But I think that's a disservice to America because we are a multiracial country. We are a multi-ethnic country. So when we're talking about a salad bowl, right? Give me some ingredients in a salad bowl. What do you put in a salad? Lettuce. What else? Tomate. What else? Cucumbers. What else? Onions. What else? Dressings, right? We put all different types of these really beautiful, colorful, delicious foods, right, into this bowl, and they never lose their individuality. Right? Every tomato retains its flavor. Every piece of lettuce has its flavor. Every onion has its flavor. But it all comes together to make this beautiful salad. And that's how I like to look at America, right? That we all need to retain our individuality and our uniqueness because that's what makes America America, right? Imagine we're all the same. Right. Imagine if we only had one type of food in America. Listen, I don't know about y'all, but I cannot live without different types of ethnic dishes, right?
Vegetarian stuff.
All right.
I know that the first few of us that have shared our experiences, have primarily been Latino, but I know that we're not the only ethnicity out there with multiple denominations. There's lots of flavors with when it comes to Baskin Robbins, right? So I'm interested to hear if anyone who's not Latinx has experienced anything similar. Like on the Asian side of the house, we have what? Japanese, Korean, Chinese. I would imagine that there's a little bit of that lived experience within other cultures as well, right? Because you get stigmatized, lived in America. Oh yeah, you guys all look the same, right?
Any of my non-Latinos want to share some lived experiences?
So much. Everything's just cool, Everything's just cool. You can.
Well, I see that Yvette. I had a very different experience. New Brunswick is predominantly Hispanic and Black, so I've always felt included within my community. We'd share music and dances and spaces. It was odd to see a Caucasian person except for that one. That's so interesting. That's so interesting because, like, for me personally, I was the opposite. I went to a predominantly white school. So I never got to experience what it'd be like to be in school with all people who look like me and have similar cultures. So for my students here, how many of y'all went to a school that was predominantly one race or one culture?
Portion, yes.
Okay. How many of us, it was like super mixed or super diverse? Where did we go? Where was
Franklin?
Yes, Franklin's super diverse. Franklin's super diverse. Where did you go? Woodbridge? Piscataway. Okay, Piscataway. Who else had diverse schoolings? Where'd you go? South River. Okay, what about you? JF, is that in Jersey City?
Yes. Okay.
Oh, that's in Woodbridge. Where?
It's in Island.
Oh, Island. Okay. Very cool. I am a Gen X student, so my experiences are different of that of my daughter. Oh, Gen X.
That is super interesting.
I love that we're bringing generations in here because
I'd love to hear more. I'd love to hear more from Anna because this is such a multifaceted topic, and it doesn't just come down to race, right? There's classism, there's social, economic factors that that factor into this. But you know, we can start by looking at it, you know, through the multi-lens of a generational perspective as well. Like, how has your experience, Anna, as a Gen X student, what was your experience like? What made it different than that of your daughters?
Well, for me, can you all hear me?
Yes.
For me, I grew up in Newark, in a Portuguese area.
Yes.
But I went to Eastside High School. It was multicultural. We had everything. But my friend base was mostly Portuguese. So for me, it was being one of the only Latinas in the honors program. So it was very difficult to kind of like own it and be Latina enough, for one thing, as a first generation American too.
Right.
So, you know, my first language was Spanish. I went to bilingual first, second grade, then it was all English. Kind of, you got thrown into the fire. We didn't have ESL like they do now, where people continue using their Spanish language all through high school and use it as a base. We had to learn English. There wasn't a question of having a bilingual student in a senior class. You had to do it in English. There was no extra help for most kids. Some they did, but that was different. But my daughters, being second generation Americans, half Ecuadorian, half Puerto Rican, they went, unfortunately, to a school that was in South Jersey, wasn't multicultural. They were the only Latinas in all the way to middle school.
Right.
So it was completely different trying to keep them. They don't speak Spanish.
Right.
Because of it. They lost that sound that I had, where I could speak to other people, even in Portuguese, and it sounds so similar, but they lost that sound. They weren't exposed to it. So it's quite different. We ended up moving to South River, which is mostly Portuguese with a touch of Hispanic culture, and it's completely different. So they had a different middle school and senior and high school experience. So they got to do both.
Right.
But as a parent of someone that is, you know, Gen Z learning and hearing it now more, it's completely different.
Right.
Because as a parent, I had to keep our foods, introducing our foods into the culture, trying to learn myself as a different person and trying to navigate it myself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think, Anna, thank you so much for sharing. I think that speaks to the power dynamics that we have in this country. You said something along the lines of like they kind of like threw you in there and you had to figure out English, right?
Yep.
And I think that that's the expectation, even though, right, in the United States, we don't have an official language, right? In the United States, there's no official language, being that we're so multiracial, multi-ethnic, right? But being that there is a dominant group in the United States, right? Those are typically the ideologies, the language, the religion, the culture that is going to be pushed onto us, right? That we're expected to assimilate to. So for you, Anna, right? Like you coming here, anybody who came here, Angel, you coming here, right? You were expected to learn English. And if you didn't, it was an issue. You were the problem, right? And I think it's something that we need to talk about a little bit more in terms of, you know, the expectations of assimilation. Do we want to assimilate, or do we want to maintain our unique languages and culture and practices and things like that, right? Because it's also very difficult to find bilingual programs at least in New Jersey, as far as because I'm looking for a bilingual program for my son. And I live in like, I don't want to say South Jersey, but it's like on the border of Central and South Jersey.
Right.
And so finding bilingual programs there is slim to none, very slim to none. So I do feel for you, and you know how you said your kids don't speak any Spanish too, and that's like, we don't want to lose our language, right? We want to keep on passing that down because that is a huge part of our culture.
Right.
But thank you for sharing, Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I heard a couple of things from what you shared, and it sounds to me like your experience as compared to your daughters, if I'm thinking about it in terms of like what's changed from the time you were a student to now their time as students, it's like there's definitely that element of things have gotten, we've made some progress, right? Because there's,
Indeed. Yep.
there's ESL, there's more resources available for your daughters as students. And of course, that's always kind of like the gist of what we get from Gen X or the boomers, or even, the silent generation, is like things, of course, were harder for them. If you're the first person to do something, you're first generation, you're the first person to do anything, you're a pioneer, things are automatically going to be harder for you, but you're breaking doors down for the next generation, right? So in that sense, things have gotten better. But also, depending on where you are in the world, you also have to deal with this element of like, your daughters aren't able to communicate with different groups of people in multiple languages. So in that sense, part of the culture, like, are we losing it with the next generation? Is it not being passed down? Like, is how much of our culture is going to be undermined or whitewashed or taken away from us because of the fact that we have assimilated. So and I think it's also like, it's not a one size fits all approach that you can take to this, because you can be that person who's in New Brunswick and feel like, oh, I was accepted because, I grew up around Latinos and Black people. So everybody was very accepting. But you could grow up in a neighborhood like Jersey City, which back in the day, you could be on one side of the street and everything's cool. And then you cross the street and you're in the hood, man.
Yep. That was North too.
So it's also like you have to assess your environment, the circumstances that are creating your lived experience, and then figure out an approach that works best for you and your loved ones. Because, we're not here to just survive, right? We want to thrive. And we have to be very strategic about the way in which we go about that. I think another point that you also mentioned, going to East Side High, made me think of the movie Lean on Me, right? So then it's like, how does the media also affect our perception of ourselves, right? You watch a movie like Lean on Me and, you're like, oh man, those poor kids in Newark, all those Black and Latino kids, from that high school, what are the chances they're going to get out? You think about movies like Dangerous Minds. You think about movies like Coach Carter, like, there's so many stories that have been told that influence the way that we perceive ourselves and those around us. So it's such a loaded lens that you brought up. So I appreciate that.
And that's socialization, right? That's media socialization, right? Thinking about how we are able to perceive ourselves and learn things about ourselves through the media. Right? Even though they might not necessarily be true. We don't want to have self-fulfilling prophecies, right?
Right.
That are negative self-fulfilling prophecies. We don't want to conform to negative stereotypes just because we've internalized that, because it's what we've seen. Right?
Maybe that's a good question to pose to the group. Is there anyone here who has watched a movie, seen a commercial, watched a news report that has given you a projection of how you perceive yourself or those around you, and then when you bring that into the real world, you're met with the reality, which is not what you were informed of through media?
Can anyone say that?
I know I always like those movies. Anytime Coach Carter's on, it's like I gotta watch it.
Does anyone internalize any stereotypes? Negative ones. It doesn't mean that you behave that way. It could be something you think about yourself. It could be implicit bias. Well, I can give you one, a personal one for myself. When I was in high school, I had just thrown the idea out to a couple of friends that, maybe one day I want to be a professor. I knew I always wanted to be a teacher. And I said, maybe one day I want to be a professor. And the reaction that I got was, one, you're a girl. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. And two, you're a Latin girl. So what would make you think that you can go and work your way up and educate other people? That was the response that I got.
You're a double threat.
Quite a few people. Quite a few people, right? And for a little bit, I did internalize that. I didn't go to school for education. I kind of like left that. I did education a very like different alternate way. I didn't go the traditional route, like going to college and getting my teaching degree and doing all that, because I was like, well, I kind of lost the sparkle. Someone took the sparkle from me for a minute. And then I had to be reminded for a second of the sparkle. And then here we are, right? So
take your sparkle.
don't take my sparkle, okay? Right? So that's the same for all of you. Don't let people take your sparkle. You know what you're capable of doing, right? Race doesn't impact your abilities, your intelligence, your work ethic, your drive, right? Even though they try to tell us it does, but it doesn't. Okay? So is there any other examples that we can think of where maybe you like internalized something and doubted yourself? Yes.
I think media, especially, it puts in people's heads that certain groups are certain ways.
Yes.
So, like, for example, for Latin people, like, women in Latin shows are very spicy.
Yes, we're always spicy.
Yeah, but in reality, Latin people are the same as all other people.
Romanticizing and also eroticizing Latin women and women of color in general, right? We're going to get into this later on in the semester, but this narrative that women of color don't say no. Don't say no. Yes, it's the narrative that's been pushed, right? That's been pushed onto women of color that because we're spicy, right? We don't ever say no. How do you feel about that? As women in here, it's what? Dehumanizing, 1,000,000%. All based off of a stereotype, based on an arbitrary thing like our skin color. Right?
We got some more folks sharing in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking. I'm seeing.
Bianca Gomez, I want to share my experience of moving from the Dominican Republic to the USA. When I made this transition, I moved to a town where the majority of residents were Hispanic, and I already knew how to speak Spanish before I arrived, so my language skills were not a barrier. I've never felt discriminated against. That is always a good thing.
That's good. And I'm glad that you didn't have to go through some of these barriers, right? Especially the language barrier. Because that could be a really tough one, and people can be super harsh when, you know, you always say like, oh, this person's been in this country for 20 years and they don't speak any English or whatever the case is, right? We hear that argument
Oh my God.
and people get upset about it. But again, it's like if I'm in my community surrounded by my people and this is the language that I use every day at home, right? So I'm glad that you didn't experience that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to learn, post transition, and as you began to, continue your journey after making that transition, is like, there's a big world out there, and although you may have moved to a town where the majority of the residents were Hispanic and you were very welcomed, which is wonderful. I'd be curious to learn if, as you continued your journey, like extending beyond the town that you moved to, how has that lived experience continued? Has there been any impact, any transitions to it, once you step out of that community and explore the world? Milvia Gomez, also Dominican, and when you moved to the USA, you already spoke English fluently. You also moved to a Latino community, but you felt left out because you were already finishing high school and the friend groups were already made, and doing friends when school is getting to the end is harder than what you expected. I experienced something like that too. I had a transition in high school where I moved to another city in the middle of my senior year. So it was like, those relationships were already built and you only had 6 months to establish any of your own. So, the ones that you are able to establish are probably short-lived. And I think that's probably just more of a circumstantial social aspect to what you experience rather than, like straight up discrimination. But I would imagine that since you already spoke English fluently, you had an easier time assimilating with the rest of the group. But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. I went through that as well, and it's not easy.
Yeah, especially in high school.
Yeah.
High school is tough. And the later you transition in high school, I can only imagine it gets tougher.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's see.
Hello, let me see. Hello, my name is Kimberly. I went to school in Perth Amboy. My experience was kind of sour. I thought that because being around people that spoke Spanish, the transition was going to be easy, but it wasn't. I was targeted a lot because of how I spoke, even though we were all Hispanic. It's like why your own people are targeting you. Why among each other do we tear each other down? Yes. I see it often in the Spanish communities where people put each other down for how they speak, yes, or where they're from. Where they're from, even though we're thought to all be the white man. I would definitely agree with that. I think within our own communities, we have to heal within our own communities, right? So along with colorism, within any community of color, right? It's the same concept here. It's rather than realizing our strength and solidarity, right? We're constantly in conflict with each other over the smallest little differences. Like it sounds like you're talking about, Kimberly, talking about like dialect, something as easy and simple as dialect. Like if I speak Puerto Rican Spanish versus someone who speaks Dominican Spanish or Colombian Spanish, right? They're different dialects, but the fact that we judge each other or think less of each other because of that is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that interracial biases and discrimination, I think, is a tough one, and I think it's something that's been imposed on us, and it only serves to keep us even that much more divided, and it kind of precludes us from unifying as a race and being able to take care of each other and create opportunities for each other.
We have power in solidarity. We have power in togetherness. It's when we isolate each other, that's where we find ourselves in problems, right?
Yeah.
I see Yvette, right?
I think we have Kelly right before.
Oh wait, yeah, Kelly. I agree when it comes to Latin shows. I can never feel connected with any women in the shows because of how they were portrayed, as well as the interest they're supposed to like. Yes, and not only with going off of the eroticism and the romanticizing and the spicy of women of color, right? There's also this idea of there's a really lack of representation in terms of skin tones when we're looking at, let's say, novelas, for example. Most of the leads in novelas, right, light skin, light eyes, light hair, right? And then if you see characters who are more like the villain or maybe the maid or the help, right? They have the darker features. Maybe it's the darker skin, the darker hair, the darker eyes, right? So again, it's upholding this institution of whiteness, that whiteness is what we should be trying to get to, right? So thank you for sharing, Kelly. Who's up here?
Cass,
yeah.
There's so much content on this too when it comes to the point that Kelly brought up about women in shows and how they're portrayed. For anyone who might be interested, I was just looking this up. I'm pretty sure I've watched this already, but there's a documentary about Lucille Ball.
Do we know Lucille Ball?
It's on Amazon Prime. A video called Lucy.
Listen, my students you're Gen Z, right? They're Gen Z. They don't know who Lucille Ball is.
That's why you have Google, guys.
You never saw the show I Love Lucy? No way. Yes, that's Lucille Ball. And listen. So go ahead. What is this documentary about?
It's about the career of Lucille Ball's career and how she had to straddle the way that she portrayed herself, being a Latina actress, and some of the challenges that she had to deal with dating back to, come on, I Love Lucy. What was that?
That was black and white
50s, like 1950s? Huh?
Lucille Ball was Latina?
No.
Well, Desi Arnaz sure was.
Who that was Ricky, right?
Right.
Another person we can speak about in I guess media, Rita Moreno.
Yes.
Moreno, she played Anita in West Side Story. She's on a show, or not right now, but it's a recent show, One Day at a Time on Netflix. She's also been on Jane the Virgin. I don't know if you've seen any of these shows. They're amazing, but just check them out. Rita Moreno's another one who she's been in the game for forever, and she talks about how every single role that she had earlier in her career was very, very stereotypical. She had to have this, the same type of accent. She had to dress exactly the same, like very Latina, stereotypical, right? And I think Rita Moreno was also one of the first people to win a Grammy, or Latinas to win. I forgot which award. Maybe one of those big awards. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm dropping a bunch of trailers in the chat for anyone who's interested. The first one I dropped is the documentary about Lucille Ball, and then the second one is a documentary about Rita Moreno called "Just a Girl Who Decided to Go for It."
Yes.
And it's extremely good documentary about her career as well. I mean, we're talking about she dated Marlon Brando, so she's the real deal.
Has anyone seen And that's so funny because in West Side Story, Natalie Wood,
right,
playing a Puerto Rican, is not Puerto Rican. She's not Latina at all.
Right.
And she was playing a Latina.
And they made it look all them brown.
Yes, and the guy, yes, oh my gosh, you bring all this up. The guys who were playing the Latinos, the Sharks, they were also, they weren't really dark skinned. They had to, they did the paint and to make them darker. Yes. Very true, right? It's like rather than hiring actors of that nationality, of that ethnicity, because that's who they are, that's who they represent, we'd rather hire other people who can play those parts, right? Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I see Jesse. Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse. I'm currently a student at Middlesex.
Hold on. I'm gonna keep you accountable to the order of the chat.
Snap.
Yvette is back up after Kelly. Yvette.
Oh, okay, I got you. Because New Brunswick is predominantly Black and Hispanic, that doesn't stretch into Rutgers students who go there. I have seen many TikTok videos of new Rutgers students who make fun of the shootings, the homeless, or the loud Spanish music. And yes, although that happens, it's not why they make it loud. It's not as bad as they make it out to be. I guess it's because I was raised here and they weren't, and they just have a different perspective of the city. That's so funny that you bring that up because in Jersey City, I want to say a few months ago, my husband was out sitting at like a restaurant eating, and in Jersey City, you always hear salsa music, people playing music like with their windows down and everything like that. It's nothing out of the ordinary. But this woman was walking down the street, and there was a guy who was playing really loud Spanish music in his car, just passing through, whatever, and she stopped and looked at my husband and was like, "Oh my goodness, isn't that so annoying? All this loud music, playing here, all that loud Spanish music." And to your point, Yvette, it's kind of like city culture, right? That's a part of the culture. When you go to places like New York City, when you go to any city, people are playing music outside. People are sitting outside. People are out and about. It's not like a suburb where everyone's like in their house, it's more quiet, right? So to speak to that, it's like the not understanding the culture of city culture versus, I guess, suburban culture or rural culture, I would say. And I'm wondering to speak to the students that go there at Rutgers who are coming from other towns, surrounding towns, or maybe from out of state, for example, and who have never experienced a city like New Brunswick. I wonder how we educate those students to be more accepting, to change their perspective, right? Because you are coming into a new town, a new city, where you essentially have to learn the culture in order to navigate, right? So any ideas on how we could educate those coming into our neighborhoods? And my virtual people, this is a question for y'all too. How do we think we can educate people?
I think most people learn culture when they have friends in it.
So it's easier to learn something when you have like a connect.
Because you can fall. It's not that you can fall back on them, but it's more so like you pick it up at a safer pace.
That makes sense.
Than entering the culture and being looking at the job.
That makes sense. You have someone to kind of like check you.
Yeah,
like a tour guide, right? Yes, I like that. That's cool. What else? Yes.
I'd say just like observe and be open-minded. Like, don't go into somebody else's neighborhood expecting stuff that you do in your hometown. It's not yours.
Yes. Remember, we briefly talked about ethnocentrism versus cultural relativism, right? If we go into a neighborhood or into another country with an ethnocentric lens, we're doing ourselves and everyone else a disservice, right? Because we're going in there with our own perceptions, our own lived experiences, expecting everybody else to do the same. But if we come in with an open mind, which is more cultural relativism, and I look at you through where you are and I perceive you through your eyes, it makes it a lot easier for us to understand each other. So I love that. I mean, and it takes a lot of bravery to be open-minded, right? So am I in line still? Who else? Oh no.
I think
I'm losing it.
Anna's comment about colorism was the next one. She
Oh,
shared
okay.
one of her daughters is light skinned and the other is tan and curly hair.
Do you notice, Anna, that they get treated differently? If you could speak to that, because I think that's something that's really, really interesting, especially because they're siblings, and to see the difference in treatment would be interesting.
I actually do see it. My youngest is light skinned with straight hair, and my oldest is tan with curly hair. My youngest gets confused for Portuguese or other things.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question my eldest is Latina.
Mm-hmm.
Even though people say they look like twins, sometimes they definitely don't. But it's I see it. I do see people's eyes and the difference.
Mm. And
I
I'm
don't
sure as a mom, right? Your
Yep.
mama bear energy comes out.
Absolutely. There is no question. It's quite, even as a younger, when they were little, it was something that sparked all that mama bear stuff
Mm-hmm.
because you always want to protect your kids.
Of course.
So when you see that people are treating the kids differently, it's just something that your instinct is to keep them safe.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. Right. I've seen it.
Right. And have you ever had conversations with your daughters about this? To help them make sure that they don't internalize, especially your daughter with curly hair and the darker skin, right? Do you ever have conversations with her or both of your daughters about this?
Absolutely. The eldest actually graduated from a prominent white Caucasian small college in PA. Oh. And I want to say she was one of maybe 2 or 3 Latinas in the whole school.
Wow.
So the friend group was definitely something where we had to have those conversations early on because we didn't want her to be targeted in any way, because the neighborhood around the school was Caucasian. Everywhere around it, even though it was 20 minutes out of Philadelphia, there weren't people like her there.
Right. And that's crazy how even in such a short distance, how the social context can change so drastically from Philly to 20 minutes away where your daughter goes to school.
Yep.
And I think that also speaks to this internalization, right? Remember we were talking about the internalization and not internalizing these negative stereotypes. But I think it also speaks to privilege, right? A lot of us who are in communities of color, we have to have uncomfortable conversations with our children, right? A lot of the times, and especially me as a mom, right? My son is only going to be 3 years old, and I'm in my mind already, I'm like, all right, I got to have certain conversations with him because he's Latino. He's also a man, a boy, right? So I know men can be targeted later on in life, right? So just having these conversations about our skin color, about our hair texture, about our accents, about how the rest of the world might perceive us when we go out into the world, right? And I think that speaks to privilege. So, there are some families that don't ever have to have these conversations, But then there's families like our families where we have to have these conversations to protect our children, right?
If you don't mind, I actually want to comment on something about colorism.
Go for it.
So I'm the youngest out of 5 siblings. I have two older sisters and 3 older brothers, and we all look very different. So if you compare to me to, let's say, the youngest brother, he appears more white. He has the more whiter skin color, whiter skin. His hair is more straight. Where compared to me, I'm a lot more tanner and I have wavy hair. Yet also compare that to my eldest brother, who out of all of us, he has a more tanner skin color. And in some cases, people never see us as siblings because of how different we look, and we don't look like the stereotypical Latina people that people assume we would look like. And it's also hard whenever I tell someone, oh, I'm Latina, they immediately assume, oh, you speak full Spanish, you know Spanish, you're supposed to have an accent. In my case, Spanish was my first language, but I later learned English and kind of forgot Spanish, where compared to my other sister, she knows full Spanish and knows no English, she has an accent. And when people see us close to each other, they don't assume we're siblings because of how different we look and how we're not the stereotypical Latina that people assume we are.
Yeah. That's definitely heavy. Cass brought up a word, privilege, and I think that made me curious for any of our mixed race folks who might be in the virtual room or in the classroom. I feel like that point I made earlier about, you're not white enough for the white people, you're not Puerto Rican enough for the Puerto Rican people. But yeah, like even beyond being quote unquote white enough, like what about that privilege aspect of it? Like, does the half of me that's Puerto Rican negate the half of me that should have the white privilege? Am I entitled to it? Do I deserve it?
That's a good one.
Is it even really privilege? Does it carry any weight? Like what is it supposed to mean for me? Am I supposed to feel bad because there's a half of me that's supposed to have this white privilege? Does the fact that Jeffrey Rowe looks good on paper, does that get my foot in the door? But then does it, shoot me in the foot once I'm actually in the door, right? I'm in the room, right?
That's a good one, because
how do you establish your seat at the table? A lot of times we have to be the ones to say, hey, here's my chair. I'm taking my seat, right?
Jeff, I hate to interrupt you.
Go for it.
But Jane just called.
Whoa, okay.
Yes. So she's trying to get on, but it's saying that the registration is closed. So what should I tell her to get on?
Yikes. This is such a good question. Let me do some troubleshooting over here.
I have her phone number, like I'm gonna cry.
Wonder if there's an option for me to be able to add someone. Yikes. So I'm copying the link to the room. Maybe we could, maybe you can try
email this to her.
Yeah, try sending her this link, and maybe she'll be able to get in.
Let me see. Let me try opening this up and see. Oh, okay. That works. Okay, so let me hold on one sec.
She might still have to, because I'm opening the link on an incognito window, and when I enter it, like she might still have to sign up for an account.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So should I'm gonna email this to her.
Email her the link. Tell her that she might have to create an account, sign up for an account, and then try accessing the link again.
Okay, so I'm sending the link. Ari, I'm gonna send you the link to your teams, okay? I appreciate everyone being so patient. Thank you, y'all.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Teams is taking forever to open now.
Are you trying to get around to?
Yeah. Give me 1 sec. Jeff, can you text me that link?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna just text it to you. All right, so we're gonna try and call Miss Jane and get herself hooked up on here, and hopefully she'll be on in the next couple of minutes. Are you gonna call her from my phone? Yeah. Wait, I didn't get it. Oh, you guys. Your team? No, I think I did your text. All right, so while we're waiting, do we want to continue? I see Kimberly has some things to say, and Jesse, and we can continue until we get Jane on here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool.
I think Jesse Rodriguez was where we left off.
Jesse Rodriguez. Okay, hold on.
Currently a student. Media has given
got you.
Defines your race.
Okay, so in my experience, media has given me the appearance that skin color defines your race regardless of your upbringing. For me, I've always been a bit darker skinned despite being Puerto Rican, and this has impacted how people perceive me and what social groups I would be expected to be accepted in. It wasn't until I grew my hair out that people would question if I was mixed at all. That's very interesting. So basically, Jesse, what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that people were treating you just based on your skin color. And then once you started changing the way you presented your hair, that's when people started to question whether or not you were of mixed race. That's so interesting because it's like the human features. Go ahead, Jesse.
Oh no, I was just gonna agree with you and say, yeah, I've always been darker skinned, but it was like my hair was always shorter, and because of that, people would, assume like, oh, well, he's a black kid or a black guy, whatever, and they wouldn't, realize, I'm actually mixed. I'm more Puerto Rican than black, and I've always struggled with that, growing up as well.
That's tough. That's fair. Has anyone ever dealt with that, like being misidentified, where you are something else, but you look like something else? So that's how people.
Oh God.
All the time?
Yes.
Really?
I think I'm half white. I'm like,
really?
I swear,
what do we get? What are some of the like boxes that people put us in?
I've actually always got mistaken to be Asian because of my eye shape and just the way my hair is.
Interesting. And what are you? How do you actually identify?
I'm Latina.
Oh, okay.
I was born in the U.S., but my family's from El Salvador.
Oh, got you. Okay, and so people mistake you for some type of Asian, right? Go ahead, Adrian.
Hey, Cass.
Yeah.
I extended the registration time on the event page, so she should be able to get in now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Adrian, go ahead.
You can't speak Spanish adequately or like fluently, call you either gringo or El Salvador.
Yeah.
Or Joe Salvador.
Yeah. That's the worst too, because it's such a feeling of isolation, right? Because why not encourage someone to keep practicing, to keep getting better, as opposed to making them feel embarrassed and shameful because they didn't know a word? That's like if I were to tell my son, get on my son for not knowing English the right way, right? And he's only 3, he's learning, right? So the fact that we do that to each other is just nonsense. But I saw a lot of hands over here talking about like, so people mistake you for what? Half like mixed, half black, half white.
Half.
What's your hand raised? What do people mistake you for? What? For white? I've gotten that too. Has anyone ever been called passing? Do we know what passing is?
Nope.
For my virtual people, do we know what passing means?
Is it like barely the culture? Like you're like,
It's like you
on, like,
Oh yes.
Oh yes. Okay, Anno, talk to us about passing.
Passing is when someone believes you're passing as white, so that this way you can get those privileges.
Yes.
And it's interesting because my fiance, his name is Bernard McGuire, but he's half Puerto Rican, half Irish.
There we go.
And Greek. So it's always interesting that people think he's passing or not Puerto Rican because of what he looks like.
Right.
And it's really interesting because of his name. Like you said earlier, people see his name and just think that he's Caucasian.
Right.
In reality, he speaks Spanish fluently.
Mm-hmm.
And people do not even see that when they're working with him.
Mm-hmm.
They may even talk about Latinos or Hispanics, and he's got to put them in check because, he's a proud Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
So he has to shut it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for my students, if you didn't hear that, passing is essentially where you identify as a different community, as a non-white community, but you look white to the mainstream population. And so oftentimes you'll be able to benefit from things like white privilege. So I'll give you an example. My little brother, my little brother is Puerto Rican and Dominican, but if you look at him, he doesn't look it. He has blue eyes, blonde hair, very light skin, right? Yes. So it's interesting because one time he was telling me that he got pulled over by a police officer and the police officer was super nice to him and let him go and this and that. Then he changed his hair and he got braids in his hair. Okay, my brother has very thick, curly hair, so he got braids. And he got pulled over another time. The cop ended up giving him 3 tickets. 3 tickets. Yeah. Right? So and it's interesting because he called me. He was like, yo, passing is a real thing. Like the first time where he looked white, the cop let him off. But now the second time where his hair is different, right? He got the braids in. Now it's like, oh, okay, now he's getting different treatment in the same town, too. It wasn't like he was in a different place. He was in the same town where 2 very different interactions with police officers. So, yes. Thank you for speaking on that, Anna. Thank you. Let's see what else we got here. Kelly, I feel people shouldn't be quick to judge when someone asks to them at least a dumb question about their culture and race, especially when people think all Latin countries are similar. Yes, I would say that we need to leave spaces open to educate people, right? We should be allowed to ask questions, respectfully, of course, asking questions. But being open to educating people who don't know, because even though we may feel like, oh, I've been surrounded by these kinds of people, there's plenty of people out in the world who live in towns or areas where they are not exposed to people who look different from them, who maybe practice a different religion or speak a different language or whatever the case is, right? So really, they're coming in with no knowledge of anything other than what they know. So I think that being able to have a safe space to safely ask questions and be educated, I think that's definitely important, for sure. Jesse says, awareness is a good start. I did a project where my group and I made a flyer during the summer. Oh, Jesse, I remember this project. During the summer about the inequalities in the workplace because of issues with race, age, gender, are all very rarely talked about and tackled in these environments. Totally. Awareness, right? What did Gandhi say? What is Gandhi's like famous quote? Yo.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Be the change you wish to see in the world, okay? If you want things to look different in the outside world, you have to change yourself within, and that starts with awareness. So being aware of your own biases, because we all have them. Even if we identify with a community that's historically marginalized or oppressed, we have our own biases too, right? Our own social conditioning that we have also been exposed to. So we have to make sure that we are battling and conquering our own biases so we can change our perceptions of the world. That way we can be the model for other people. Does that make sense? Sure. Yeah. Let me go check on Jane. Let me see what's going on.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Alrighty. She gave confirmation that she should be in here.
Wonderful.
Let's see. Jane, are you here?
I don't think she's in yet.
No. She said.
She found a link that said join.
Okay, perfect.
And then she saw something about camera on, camera off.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Yep, she's here.
Woo! Yes! Jane! Awesome. Can you hear us okay?
Jane, you should have options on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen to unmute yourself and turn on your video. If you're not seeing any of those, I can try and help. Let me make sure that presenter mode is turned on for you. So you should have controls to unmute yourself and turn on your video. Oh. Looks like camera's being turned on.
I think we're getting somewhere.
Yep. Looks like camera's on for Jane.
Do we have the capability to unmute?
I can't unmute her. I can't unmute Jane for her, but she has presenter mode turned on, so she should have those controls. I see that she has the camera turned on, even though we still can't see her, but the
mute is still on.
The mute is still on, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm gonna call one more time.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna call one more time just to make sure.
Go for it.
It depends on what if I have patience. That's what I'm saying.
Don't worry, you
I'm
grow
gonna my
some.
shit out, dude. Like, right now, bro, shit. I know I didn't even realize. No? We really got a guarantee, man. What you talking about, man? Big head.
Oh, okay. Jeff?
Yeah.
So Jane is saying that she doesn't have the ability to unmute herself.
Oh, wow. Let me double check on that.
Oh, there we go. I see you now. I see you. Oh, you see Jeff. Okay, cool. So now we just need to unmute you.
Yeah, there should be the control for that. It should be all the way in the bottom left-hand corner, right next to the control for the video.
Can you? Yes, you're good. You're good, Jane. You're on.
Oh, you just went muted again.
Oh, now you went. Now you went away. Yeah, now it's yeah, your camera's off and you're muted again. It's okay. We'll get this. We got this. Yeah. Ugh. Okay, I'm just gonna put you on
Speaker.
Can everybody hear? Hello?
Hello.
All right.
Can you hear, Jeff?
Yeah, I can hear.
All right, so we're gonna go like this. All right, I'm just gonna intro you, and then the floor is yours. Okay, Jane?
Okay, I can hear. On the telephone, I can hear you, but I cannot hear you on my video on my iPad.
Okay. Can we all hear her? Okay? Is that okay if I just go like this with phone? All right, everyone. The moment we've all been waiting for, right? Okay. We know that Jane is an international education diversity educator, right? We know.
Thank you.
And we know that the blue-eyed, brown-eyed experiment is what really shot her into. Go back. I'm going back.
I did not do an experiment with my children. It is illegal and unethical to experiment with people without their knowledge or without their permission. My students and I talked it over what had happened when the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. They were all just crushed, and so was I. And I asked, and it was our plan to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins that day."
Oh.
And I discussed that with my students, and I asked them if they would like to know how it felt to be a child who was considered something other than white in this country, and they said yes, they did. They wanted to have that experience because they had had a lot of strange experiences in my classroom, because I believe, as John Dewey said, we learn by doing. And I wanted them to learn by experiencing something instead of just talking about it. We have talked about ending racism and sexism and ageism and homophobia and ethnocentrism and anti-Semitism for about 300 years, but we haven't done it.
Right.
Because we really don't want to get rid of it, because all of those are things that make us a lot of money. So we're going to perpetuate those until they become expensive. And so I didn't do an experiment with my children. Go ahead.
Thank you for clarifying. So would it be okay if my students have gathered and got some questions together, if they can ask you their questions and then you respond to them? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. It'd be better if they could fix my hair. But that's fine.
Awesome. Okay, so who wants to start? And my virtual people, you also can ask questions in the chat and we'll make sure we get them, okay? All right, so who wants to go first?
Who dares to go first?
Yes, Angel, come on up.
Hello, Miss Elliott. Hey, so what advice can you give us for creating meaningful change and promoting equality in today's society?
Now, you want to say that slower and louder?
I'm sorry. What advice can you give us for creating meaningful change and promoting equality in today's society?
What advice can you give us?
How should we create that change, or why should we create that change?
How can we create that change?
How do we create that? By educating people. And I don't mean by teaching them. I mean by educating them. I mean by leading them out of ignorance. If your students, and if you who just asked me that question, don't realize that we are all members of the same race, the human race. There's only one race of people on the face of the earth, and the idea of different races came out of the Spanish Inquisition in the 1400s and 1500s. Before that, we were all just members of the family of man. We may have been different colors and different genders and different religions and different cultures, but we're all members of the same race. The word race, meaning a specific group of people, came out of France in 1580. That's how recently this nonsense began. Now, I suspect that none of you, I can't see you right now, but I suspect that none of you men are wearing knee breeches and powdered wigs. That's the way men were dressing in the 1500s and 1400s. If you are going to use the vocabulary of the 1400s and 1500s, if you are going to continue to call people white and black, then you have to go back to the 1500s for your means of communication and transportation and your style, your dressing style. Do you want to do that?
We want to go dress like we were in the 1500s?
No.
Well, then by the gods of war, if you don't want to do that, stop using the grammar, the language of the 1400s and 1500s. People, now this is something that you better not repeat this after today. We have the answer to racism in our hand. Look at your hand. Hold it out right out in front of you and look at it. See those 5 fingers? Assign a color, a skin color, as we have done over the last 300 years, to each of those fingers. So the thumb is the white race because it's the smallest. The first finger is the black race because it's been trying to point us to the truth for years and we refuse to watch. The third finger is the brown race. It is the biggest finger because every human being on the face of the earth is a member of the brown race. There's only one real color group on the face of the earth, not just in the United States of America, but on the face of the earth. We are all members of the brown color group. The fourth finger is the yellow color group, which doesn't exist, and the fifth finger is the red color group, which doesn't exist. Now, if we would put all of these fingers together and turn them into a fist, we could use that fist to break through the walls of bigotry and ignorance. What we're dealing with in this country today, at the college level and at every level in the United States of America and in the world, we are dealing with a lie. And it's time for us to get over the lie and start realizing that we are all members of the same race. Now, you can see what I'm doing. I'm not saying F you. I'm saying they're all members of the same race. If we keep that color group and with all those other colors that don't exist, we can change this situation. Individuals can change this situation. The next time you hear some educated individual quote the people who wrote the history of the world, Will and Ariel, whatever his last name is, in that I was going to read their history. It's 8 books of the history of the world, Will and Ariel Durant. In the book about racism, they say Sambo was a happy slave. It's in their book.
Happy
on
slave.
black print on white pages. Sambo was not the name of those people that we brought to this country. And incidentally, black people didn't come here first as slaves. They came here as explorers, adventurers, brilliant people who left the area of the equator and proceeded to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. Every person that is listening to me now, and even those who are sitting there thinking, I don't have to listen to this shit, even you are members of my race. You are all my 30th to 50th cousins, and my ancestors came from Africa, as did all of yours. Every one of you, if you trace your DNA back far enough, would find that some of your DNA, a percentage of your DNA came from a country in Africa. Now, did I answer your question? What can you do to change the level of your own ignorance? Stop believing the crap that you were taught K through 12. Columbus did not discover America. You cannot discover a place where people are already living. They discovered it before you got there. Instead of celebrating Columbus Day, let's celebrate Indigenous Day, but you can't call them indigenous because they too came from Africa. Nobody wants to admit that we all came from Africa. Native Americans say we didn't come from Africa. We came from China. Well, where did the people in China come from? They came from the same place that all the rest of us did. People, trace your DNA back as far as you can, and the next time somebody says to you, I'm not part black, you need to say, no, you're right, not part black. Black is not the proper terminology for talking about the color of one's skin. You are definitely, however, part brown, and we all are. We've got to get rid of black and white and red and yellow to discuss skin color. Those skin colors do not exist in the human race. Now, perhaps you have ancestors from another planet, but you'll find that out if you get your DNA done. Did I answer your question?
She answer your question, Angel?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
But here's what you can do. Educate yourself. We are all living with self-imposed ignorance where race is concerned. Get the book, The Color of Law. Get the book, oh Lord. Get Andrew Hacker's book, Two Nations, Black and White, Separate and Unequal. Get the book, Myth of Race by Robert Wald Sussman. Get those 3 books and read them, and then you can say to yourself, well, I'm not going to allow people to lie to me about this anymore, and I'm not going to be gentle about it, and I'm not going to be kind about it. And here's the reason you have to do that, folks. Within 25 years, it's less than 25 years now, white people, what we call white people, will be a numerical minority in the United States of America. That's a fact. And you can deny it, and you can protest it, but it won't work. It's a fact that within 25 years, we pale-faced people will be a minority, a numerical minority in this country. If you don't believe that, watch what's happening with Donald Trump right now. Watch the lawyers who are being interviewed constantly by all the networks and realize that most of them are women of African American descent. Now think about that. And here's another thing you can do. Stop calling this country America. America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. Every citizen of every one of those countries included in that area are Americans. What makes us different is we live in the 48 contiguous states and Alaska, Hawaii, and the islands off the southeastern coast of the United States. That is the United States of America. For 4 years, and he's still doing it, we had a so-called president who tried to divide this country. He got away with it. We are more divided now than we have ever been in my lifetime, and I will have lived 90 years in November. So I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot, I've witnessed a lot, and I've been angry a lot, which I should have died a long time ago. Blood pressure, deterioration, your life, man. I should have died when I was 45, but I didn't, so here I am, and you're having to listen to me. People, start calling this country the United States of America. If that's too many syllables, call it the U.S., because those 2 letters together spell us. And that's what we're talking about here, people. We're talking about people who are citizens of the United States of America. everybody in all those other American countries can call themselves Americans.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't just Americans. We are citizens of the United States of America. You got it?
We got it.
Everybody nod or said, yes, Mrs. Elliott.
Yes, Mrs. Elliott.
Thank you very much. You're very good students, and I appreciate you answering the way I want you to. And those of you who didn't answer that way, I'll come after you. I can see you, and I'll recognize you the next time I see you. I'll take you over in the corner, and I'll say, now look, fool, you are one of us. That's the United States. Be sure you remember it. And when you say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag in the future, leave out the words under God. Those words weren't in there until 1953 when President Eisenhower was lobbied by the congressmen to get the words under God inserted into the pledge.
Wow.
People, that was the beginning of the takeover by the evangelical Christians in the United States of America. You have to put a stop to it. Put a stop to it now. Get God, get religion, not get God out, but get religion out of the classroom and get it out of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. It has no place in there. Furthermore, they put it in there just before the word indivisible. And when you put the word God in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, you have divided us automatically into those who believe in God, or the God that we Christians believe in, and those who don't. It's a bad idea. It was a bad idea when they started. And you people are young enough. You're going to be around to make this happen. I'm not. But you're going to be around to make this happen. Get the words under God out of the pledge, and get in God we trust off our money. People, if you trust in God, you don't need money. Think about this. Think about this. When I was a kid, I suppose I was 12 years old. I went to pick my dad up, or get with my dad in the restaurant. We were going to go home, and there's a sign on the wall that said, "In God we trust." Right underneath that sentence, it said, "All others pay cash." I started to laugh, and my dad said, "What's so funny?" I said, "Look at that sign there." And he looked at me and said, "My God, that's right." So after that, he'd look at paper money and he'd say, oh my God, why is this on here? It makes no sense, people. We need to get it off. We need to tell evangelical Christians that their Christianity is theirs, but they cannot force it on all the rest of us, and we must resist. Resist, absolutely. Those who would put God back in the classroom, because they don't want God there. They want evangelical Christianity there. Those two are very different things. We do not want organized religion running our schools. You've got to protest this loudly and at length. And if enough of you make enough noise just to get you off their backs, they'll change it. Yeah, and if you have the numbers, and if you go home and talk to your husbands or wives or whoever it is you're loving, or if you have children, tell them, make a large enough group that you are a pain in the neck for the people who are forcing this onto us. We've got to put a stop to putting religion back in the classroom, in the schools, in our government, or in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Am I making sense here?
Yes, a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah, well, people, you have the power. You have the power because of your age and because of your numbers to realize that when you get to be my age, you're going to be looking back at grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren who don't look like me. They're going to look like that browner-skinned person who might be sitting next to you in that classroom. Because make no mistake about this. As the hole in the ozone layer begins to get larger again, it was getting smaller, and then along came T. Rump. And because of his policies, we went back to fossil fuels, and now the hole in the ozone layer is getting larger. As it gets larger, more and more sunlight will be allowed to enter our environment, and more people with a little melanin in their skin will die of melanoma. Which is a skin cancer that you get because you don't have enough melanin in your skin to protect your cells from the damaging rays of the sun. So in the very near future, all of those of you who think you're white, and you aren't, you're a shade of brown, are going to be looking for darker brown people with whom to reproduce so that your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren can survive in what is coming onto this earth because of the ignorance of those who think it's all right to use fossil fuel because they don't believe in forever. They just believe in today. They don't think about forever. They don't think about tomorrow. They don't think about next month or next year. They just think about today. In God we trust. Well, if you trust in God, you better start behaving as though you have the common sense God supposedly gave you. Did I answer your question again several times?
You sure did. You sure did. So that leads me to the next question.
I don't do yes and no answers. Okay?
Well, that brings us to the next question. So, where do you see us? Is there hope for us, Mrs. Elliott? Is there?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you where the hope is. The hope is in young people who see what's happening today, who will go and get a history book and read about what happened yesterday. If you will read about what happened in the years between 1933 and 1945, what the Nazis did in Germany and then all over Europe and intended to do it worldwide, you will see the horrendous similarity between what Hitler did and what Donald Trump tried to do and is still trying to do. You need to get the book When at Times the Mob is Swayed. And in the first chapter, I think it's in the first chapter, he says Donald Trump has in his bedside table in a locked drawer the book The New World Order, which contains the writing of Adolf Hitler. And when you check what happened in this country from 1933 till 1945, you will realize that what P. Rump is trying to do and is determined to do is do exactly what Adolf Hitler did. He studied Adolf Hitler, and that's the reason he behaves the way he does. When I first noticed him before he got elected the first time, and I thought at the time, my God, this is Hitlerian. And then because I tend to exaggerate, or at least people think I'm exaggerating, I thought, no, you're imagining this, that isn't right. And then I read When at Times the Mob is Swayed. I was right. He is Hitlerian. It's all he knows. So imagine, you can't imagine. I can remember. I don't have to imagine it. I know what it was like to live under a Hitlerian regime. I don't want to do that again. But that's what Donald Trump wants for us. You need to know that. He needs to be the leader of the world. And he, if you've seen him today, the interviews they are showing of him yesterday, I think it was yesterday, he did some interviews and they put him on television. Oh my God, somebody else has given him control of his hair.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, and you need to know that he had a bad scalp infection at one time, so there's a chunk of his scalp that's gone, so it doesn't grow hair. So that's the reason he pulls his hair over to the side. So that's the reason for his hairdo. But now evidently somebody has stopped combing his hair, and it's all him, and he's just a mess. And I'm thinking, oh my God, his wife is angry at him. Whoever is combing his hair out, I think it's probably P. Rump.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's when you see him, you can't imagine what I'm thinking because you haven't been where I've been. But I don't want you to be where I've been. I don't want people to have to remember this next century or this next decade or this next 2 years or next 5 years being the way it was in Germany during the Nazi years. We've got to see to it that is stopped. You have the opportunity to refuse to go along, people. Okay, any other questions?
We have one more question.
I'm from China. The Chinese education is full of involution and race rats, because only good students with good marks can go to university. Is there any possibility to change?
What's the last word, the last question you asked?
Okay, so I'm going to read it again. So, Chinese education is full of involution and rat race. At the request of parents, teachers in schools, students extend their study time and immerse themselves in exercises because only those with good grades can get into universities. What do you think of these circumstances? Is there any possibility of change?
I think that if students immerse themselves in being active, that they will learn more as active students than they will if they sit there and listen to the teacher and regurgitate what the teacher says. I think you learn by doing. John Dewey said he was absolutely right. You learn by doing. You make mistakes and you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. Because one thing you learn is not to do that again. I think it's absolutely essential that we learn from the past in order to avoid the mistakes that we made in the past in the future. Somebody has said those who forget the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. It's a good thing to listen to those Chinese students because their parents remember the past, they were forced to learn about the past, and they haven't given it up. You better learn about different cultures, and you better learn about what is good or what is bad about each of those cultures, and then think on the positive aspects of every one of those cultures, because that's how this United States of America came to be. First, we killed those who owned this country. We put them on reservations. We found out you couldn't enslave them because they could run away and you couldn't tell them apart, so you couldn't tell which ones were your slaves and which ones weren't. So then we bought slaves from Hull, England, where the people from England had bought those slaves from people of color in Africa. They went to African people. You need to realize that. They were all complicit in this ridiculous business. People from this country went to slave traders in Hull, England. I've been there. It's an interesting place. They bought their slaves there. They brought them to this country because they couldn't depend on their ability to identify the slaves that they enslaved in this country. It's the only reason we brought people from Africa. We didn't realize that the very people we wanted to enslave in this country came from Africa too. Folks, if you think I'm lying about this, if you want a really short, easy way to understand what's going on, get the National Geographic magazine from, I think it's
Hello? Uh-oh. Jane, are you here?
Oh my God. It uses the word biracial. People, there are no biracial people unless one of the members of that marriage is from outer space. Mr. Biden, President Biden, a month or so ago, signed legislation making it legal to be either bisexual or biracial. You can't be biracial. I wanted to call him and say, look, Joe, get your thinking apparatus out of your anal area. It's just so ridiculous for somebody who is the president of the United States to talk about biracial people. There are no biracial people. We've got to get rid of those words that indicate that there's more than one race.
Can you repeat the National Geographic title? Can you repeat that?
What?
The National Geographic. What was the name of it?
The National Geographic. It's okay. Now you've done it. Now I'm going to go in the other room and National Geographic magazine. I thought this interview was going to be a very short one, so I wasn't going to have to say much. I wasn't going to have to know much. Well, I don't know much, but I have a lot to say. And you can learn more than I know simply by getting the National Geographic magazine. Luckily for me, your camera can't follow me into my bedroom. Wow. National Geographic, April of 2018. I was pretty close. April of 2018. There's a picture on the front, and the title is Black and White.
Black and White.
That's the title of the thing. But underneath it says, these twin sisters make us rethink everything we know about race. Well, it doesn't make us rethink everything we know about race, because everything we know about race is a lie. You cannot put those two girls on that front of that National Geographic magazine and put under them the words black and white, because that says that the people who make this magazine don't even know that there's no such thing as black people and white people. You get that magazine and then you turn to page 41, and I don't know whether you can see this. Can you see this?
I cannot.
Oh, well, then I'll put it down. It's a map. On page 41 is a map that shows where we came from in two waves. People left Africa and moved to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. And they got to the northern part of the United States, which is Canada. Alaska, I'm sorry, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And they got there between 20,000 and 15,000 years ago. So come on, folks. Instead of calling ourselves Americans, we've got to call us what we are. Afro-Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of us. We don't want to do that. So call ourselves United States American citizens.
Mm.
Yeah, this map is just absolutely wonderful. As humans migrated out of Africa in two waves, some scientists say, they adapted to new environments in many ways. Skin color is just one. Racial distinctions were written into the Jim Crow laws of the post-Reconstruction South and are now written into statutes like the Civil Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race or color. Oh my God, there's only one color and there's only one race.
Mm.
Oh, and to the victims of racism, it's small consolation to say that the category has no scientific basis. No scientific basis.
So race is not.
Think of that, people. You're in college, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking to a college class.
Mm-hmm.
By the gods of war, you people need to read the book, White Evangelical Racism.
White Evangelical Racism.
By Anthea Butler. Her name is capital Anthea Butler, Butler. If every one of you reads that book, you will say to yourself, the next time somebody comes up to you and says, oh, bless you, my dear, I want you to join our group, you'll say, do I look crazy? Because if I join that group, that proves I'm not thinking very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You are not invited to join a group if you are going to think well.
Mm-hmm.
Be really careful about the kind of garbage that you are willing to ingest.
Yes. Consumption is important.
Well, if you just get this National Geographic magazine and read it, that race is a human construction doesn't mean that we don't fall into different groups or there's no variation. But if we made racial categories up, maybe we can make new categories that function better.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting? If
Yes.
race is a social construct, then we can find people who are better engineers at constructing reality.
I like that. How do you feel about that, y'all? Good? Well, we would love to thank you so much, Mrs. Elliott, for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure and honor. Can we say thank you? Thank you.
An old, pale-faced female. Oh, there's something else you have to know.
Oh, yes.
I thought for years that the word woman was written because we bring woe to men. Because that's what a woman does. She brings woe to a man every time. But happily. A young Asian, younger than I am, everybody's younger than I am. Fairly brown person told me last week, or two or 3 weeks ago, I told her about woman. She said, well, that's nice, but you see, the word woman actually comes from the word womb.
Oh.
If you have a womb, you are a woman.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely, woman. Womb ends with a final silent B.
Oh.
So limb and numb and dumb and a whole mess of words. So you can just put the first 3 letters of the word womb onto the word. And she said, if you come from Iowa, you're an Iowan. If you come from Mexico, you're a Mexican. You come from Texas, you're stupid. No. She didn't. You come from Texas, you're a Texan. If you have a womb, you're a woman.
That makes sense. So for all my women in here.
Perfectly good sense, and of
Makes
course,
sense.
it came from the mouth of a woman.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it just, you have to, from now on, somebody says to you, well, we were a man before we were a woman. You say no. And when you see that, you look at those anthropology books, and there's that great big shaggy man walking into the future. And you have to say to yourself, well, where'd he come from? Men cannot reproduce asexually without a woman. Women can reproduce asexually and probably did for many years. And then as a result of a mutation of the genes, the first man was born. So when you're When you're arguing with a man, remember you're talking to a mutant, and don't get too excited.
I can't wait to tell my husband that one.
I would wait a very long time. I would wait for many, many years before I told him that. It totally changes the dynamics in your situation. Because nobody wants to disbelieve what they've been told all their lives, which is that men are the superior gender.
Right.
Well, they aren't. And we can reproduce without them. It has been done before, and it will be done again, people. You can put two female cells together, egg cells together, in a mammal cell together in a petri dish, break down the cell wall, and come up with another female mammal. Now, if you put a bunch of sperm cells in a petri dish and mix them all up, all you get are mixed up sperm. You will not get another mammal human being. You will do it. People, you need to realize that probably women were here first. The oldest human remains they found so far were the remains of a woman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And hey, I love men. I was married to one until he died finally to get away from me, I think, 10 years ago. But I cannot, because living without that man is almost impossible, and I don't want to do it anymore. But I got to keep on doing this until I get everybody convinced that there's a better way to educate people than by teaching the lies of the past.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mrs. Elliott.
You'd like to get off this, wouldn't you? Okay.
No, not at all. I love speaking with you.
Get the National Geographic magazine for, what did I say?
April 2018. I'm going to look in our school library.
2018. Read it. Download that map that's on page 41. Have it enlarged, have it laminated, and hang it on the wall. Hang it on the wall of every classroom in that college and that university.
Okay.
People, if you see this, if you have something to sell, people will buy it until they've heard the commercial or seen the commercial at least 4 times. So you've got to have that map
everywhere,
where people see it every day of their lives until they leave that institution. Because we've had the Mercator map all these years, and that's another thing. Stop using the Mercator map.
It makes America and like European countries look much bigger than what they actually are.
On the European map, Greenland is bigger than South America.
What?
Yes, look at the Mercator map. Get it out and look at it and see how the size of Greenland is hanging down there in the middle of that map like a ripe plum. And you will notice if you look carefully at that map that the equator is 2/3 of the way down the map. It's supposed to separate the Earth into 2 equal portions. It separates it into 2/3 because Mercator was commissioned by the Pope to make a map that showed the spread of Christianity.
Oh, that makes sense.
And you didn't know that. See, people, there is so much that you don't know but you are being required to learn these things that aren't true. So you don't have time to learn the truth.
We have to do a lot of unlearning.
You have to do a lot of unlearning, and your educators have to stop being trainers and teachers and counselors and start being educators. We've got to leave people out of ignorance. And one of the ways you do that is by putting the Peters projection map on the wall. It will absolutely blow you away when you realize how badly you have been miseducated by the Mercator projection map. And you see, that was in sometime in the 1600s, right? And that was after the 1400s, the 1500s, and after the evangelical Christians. After Christianity came along, came all this nonsense. Now, I'm a Christian, a practicing Christian. I'm going to keep on practicing till I get it right. I don't have it right yet, obviously, but you need to know that Christianity and other religions, but particularly Christianity, have caused a lot of problems on this earth that need never have been caused. We'd never have been separated, never would have been if it hadn't been for people, for what's his name, who decided to call people who are lighter skinned color white because that's the color of purity and goodness, and darker skinned people are black because that's the color of savagery and evil. We've been living with that long enough now, people. That and the Mercator map have to go.
Are we all open to this?
Yes.
We're all about the movement?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Very cool.
President 2020.
Yes.
I mean, something like that. Already old enough, like.
He said he's gonna run for president.
He said I should run for president.
No.
Shit, I can't even walk to the basement. How am I running for president? How many votes do you think I'd get? I'd get his. His mother got hold of him, and then his father got hold of him. Then they'd say, "You want to go back to college? Give up on that witch." And then he'd say, "Okay, I can do that." But they wouldn't say which. I have a feeling that some of you women and most of you men are familiar with the word bitch for women.
Yes.
Particularly for the woman who gets in your way. Remember this. Bitch is an acronym. You know what an acronym? An acronym is a word made up of the beginning letters of a number of words. Okay?
Uh-huh.
So, bitch is an acronym for being in total control, honey.
You heard that? What the acronym for bitch? Sorry. The acronym is, what is it again, Mrs. Elliott?
Being in total control, honey.
Being in total control, honey. That's it. So if anybody ever calls you that again, you flip the script.
When men call the B word, when they think that we're in control and they want to take the control back into their hands. And that's when they use the word bitch. And at that point, instead of being insulted, you say, "Thank you very much. I'm glad that you realize
Flip the
that
script,
I am in control. Now,
Mhm.
put your pants back on and get your ass out of here."
I love her so much. I love it. I love how you say it how it is.
That words are the most powerful weapon devised by humankind.
Mm-hmm.
We use words to kill people all day, every day. And every time some teacher looks at some little melanaceous boy coming into her classroom and says, "Oh, another little black boy," she has stuck her finger right through his ear, right straight to his brain. He's not black, and he's not boy. And yesterday somebody called me, and I told him what my email address was, and he said, B as in boy. I said, "No, not B as in boy. Don't you know another word that begins with B? We have used the word boy to infantilize black men in this country long enough. Don't ever use that word again." And he said, "Oh, I never thought of it. What word should I use?" I said, "Come up with another B word." So then he did the military thing. Bravo, blah, and he had that in his head. But he also had the word boy in his head, because I found out about 3 minutes later, I was talking to a melanaceous male. And melanaceous means having more melanin in your skin than many people do. If you don't have much melanin in your skin, you're melanemic. If you have more melanin, you're melanaceous, which rhymes with gracious and spacious and efficacious. If you got a lot of melanin in your skin, you're melanotic. And the word melanotic is in the dictionary. Yeah, and it means having a lot of melanin in your skin to being very dark brown, almost black, but not black. Okay?
Yes.
So to solve the problem of what am I going to put where it says color on these forms we have to fill out, where it says race, you're going to put human. Where it says color, you're going to go to the thesaurus and look up all the synonyms for brown. There are about 100 of them. You're going to pick the one you think describes the color of your skin. Then you're going to look that word up in the dictionary and find out if it does describe the color of your skin, and you're going to use that for skin color in the future.
Got it. You heard that, y'all?
Because if you don't do that, we'll keep on saying black and white and red and yellow, and they're all four lies.
Right.
So am I done trying to indoctrinate you now?
Yes. Thank you so much, Mrs. Elliott. We really appreciate you joining us today and learning from you. It's been amazing. So thank you. Everybody say thank you. Thank you. Bye. Have a great day. Bye.
Remember that when you say bye, you're saying goodbye, which stands for God be with you.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Oh, yeah. So you brought God right back into the conversation.
So what do we say? See you later?
See you later.
See you later.
Say have a good day.
Okay, let's try it again. Have a good day, Mrs. Elliott.
And have a good day. That means have a good day.
Awesome. Well, have a good day, Mrs. Elliott. We'll talk soon.
You're welcome. Good day.
Bye-bye. Woo!
Very good. Very, very good. That was excellent. Cool. Well, I'm just gonna close it out on that.
Thank you, everyone, my virtual
Thank you,
people,
everyone,
for
for
being
joining.
so patient with us and engaging in the conversation. It really means a lot. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day and weekend.
Bye, everyone.